There's something you need to know. It's not a message that can be conveyed in language, but it can be transmitted with voices. And there's something I need to know, and you're the only person who can tell me. I'm talking about musical truths that run deeper than words and a culture that's decided that while language is for everyone, music, not so much. Music is everywhere now, but this isn't a dark ages because there's no music. It's a dark ages when you're not the one making it, and you've been convinced you couldn't or shouldn't be. In this video, I'm going to discuss the implications of that and how together we can make it better. If you're a music student, I'm going to talk about some systemic shortcomings in music lessons that prevent your growth and give specific activities you need to be looking for so you can be an educated consumer. If you're a music teacher, I'm going to give a framework for teaching that is the most important thing I've ever said or will say in a video. By the end of the video, you'll understand how the roles of teaching and learning function among us and at the same time within each of us. A few weeks ago, I heard a composer friend talk about how music is the antidote to hard times. She said this in response to the recent ICE raids. And I agree with her. Music can be soothing, but could it be more than that? Is there a role for music in society as a preventive, not just to soothe feelings in horrible circumstances, but to create a social fabric where those circumstances don't happen in the first place? My thought is that music doesn't have to be just a response. A musical culture is one that creates good times. These are dangerous times. I never talk politics on my channel, but politics is people and music is people. So just so there's no ambiguity, let me say that Black Lives Matter, trans lives matter, and ICE should be abolished today. These things are not my opinion. I'd say them because expressing them out loud creates their truth. We live the things we say out loud. We think what we say, and we do what we think. If you don't believe me, pause this video and try it yourself. I want to carefully place these ideas so you won't think I'm being naive about this. When the societal problem is acute, it's too late for music. Nazis had Jewish people playing string quartets for them before sending them to be murdered. It's too late for music to fix it when it's gotten to that point. And the situation is acute right now. And that means it's time for immediate kinds of action and activism that music alone can't provide. In this context, if music is the proverbial frog in the pot of water that's slowly being heated up, the water is already boiling. At the same time, making things better isn't only about stopping hateful behaviors. It's about habituating to loving ones. And music can be a powerful cultural force to prevent the worst of humanity, but not when we're teaching it in a way that only sticks for a handful of students. What's keeping music from taking hold in our culture in a more inviting way? I think it's because we as a culture have ceased having musical ideas. Whether it's your first recital performance or you're playing in front of 50,000 people, music is now a product, something to be consumed. Later, I'm going to look at some of the systemic reasons that keep us from having musical ideas and talk about how we need to modernize music education so that everyone can learn to use music to create a brighter future. Not as consumers, but as creators. But first, I want to talk about what a musical idea is. The late Daniel Quinn wrote a book called Ishmael, in which a talking gorilla named Ishmael uses the Socratic method to teach the human protagonist about our culture, how we got to be this way, and what should be involved if we ever wanted to change our direction. It's not clear why the teacher is a gorilla, but my take is that Quinn wrote it this way to help readers take ownership of our cultural problems. It puts ideas in a mouthpiece that's in the animal kingdom but isn't human, so he can speak objectively about humanity. This leads readers to think in new ways about our own role as creators of our culture. It allows us to think in ways that are outside our experience. It might even give you the courage to think we don't only have to do things the way they've been done in the past. Ishmael is a work of fiction, but it's also the truest book I've ever read. And if there's one thing that's true about humans, it's that we won't take action if we think somebody else is already doing it. But we're smart enough not to wait for a talking gorilla to solve our problems. The fantasy scenario invites readers into a dual role as learner and teacher, learning from the gorilla's ideas, but also processing those ideas so we can be the Ishmael for the people we care about in our actual lives. What Daniel Quinn understood is that if his readers weren't coaxed into that step of processing his ideas for themselves, then those ideas would die with him. Ideas are only valuable in a culture where people know how to have an idea. My ideas die unless they become shaped by you into your ideas. An idea isn't a thing, it's a potential. What does any of this have to do with music? I titled this video Musical Dark Ages because I believe we've entered into a period where musical ideas are only valued in small pockets of the culture. In most of the culture, students at all levels are no longer taught to have their own ideas, and in fact are prevented from doing so. There are consequences from that. Ideas lead to actions, and these actions make us who we are, as individuals and as a culture. As a culture, our big idea is productivity and consumption, and this touches every aspect of our lives. Do you go to a job every day? Or 2 jobs? Do you feel lazy if you're not doing anything? If you've ever had music lessons, do you feel regret that you didn't practice enough, that your lessons weren't productive enough? On an individual level, this fixation on productivity and consumption can be very harmful. It can lead to depression, self-medication, jealousy, anger, hate, suicide, competition. At the cultural level, it leads to climate catastrophe and the destruction of our environment. When we as individuals engage in activities that we connect deeply with our identity, it can protect against some of those outcomes. But modern lessons don't promote that kind of engagement. We explain music at students. But music has to be nurtured and experienced, not explained. Can musical ideas compete with the cultural vision of production and consumption? Well, no, because when you're having musical ideas, you're not competing at all. The competition mindset comes from that current vision. Take capitalism, an economic system that fits perfectly with that cultural vision of production and consumption. Imagine if we took music as seriously as capitalism. I mean, that'd be crazy, right? But why is it so crazy? Why does it make more sense to pay $3 for a bottle of water than it does to sing a melody in public? Because to me, it sounds like the first thing is crazy. We worry about AI taking over because we've allowed our cultural vision to define intelligence as knowing things rather than thinking things, a product rather than a process. A computing cloud is much better than you at knowing things, but what it can never do is have your thoughts, your feelings, your ideas. Ideation is the word for the way you think, your ideas. And we have a similar word for musical thinking. It's called audiation. And it's a concept that's misunderstood by music teachers everywhere if they've heard the word at all. It's usually defined as inner hearing, but that's not the half of it. It's not inner hearing, it's inner thinking. It's having musical thoughts, musical comprehension. It doesn't even have to be inner. The way you move with music is your audiation. The way you sing, that's how you understand. It's not naming chords and reading notation. It's not even playing an instrument. The audiation instrument is you. Audiation is understanding, and it seldom darkens the doorway of a music lesson. Why is that? What I see is that we don't have a music education system. We have a music gatekeeping system. We've decided that while pretty much everybody should learn to speak, the same isn't true when it comes to music. Even though we're all wired for music, at least as much as we're wired for language. And it's not just a problem of defunding education, although that doesn't help. Music students were failing even when there were music classes in school. One problem is that we teach music from authority, like music is a skill teachers have received and it's theirs to pass on. But that's not what music is. Music is in each of us right now, and it needs to be nurtured, not imposed. When we teach from our authority, students aren't learning the subject matter. They're learning the hierarchy. They're learning subservience, obedience, and inferiority. But they're not inferior. The purpose for music and art is expression, communication, and no one can know what a student needs to express better than the student does. When I teach from authority, students are learning my limits. When I try to teach them everything I learned in my lessons, I'm looking backwards instead of daring to imagine what they might create. When people find out I'm a music teacher, they tell me things. Usually, they tell me they liked their music teacher when they were a kid, but that leaves me questioning, well, why aren't you doing any music now then? I mean, okay, you liked them, but were they really taking your education seriously? Like, what's a good outcome for music lessons? Remembering them fondly or using music as an outlet for creative expression for a lifetime, according to your potential? And let's not even talk about remembering them unfondly, because there's plenty of that too. How many students do you think achieve that outcome of creative expression? It's natural to assume that most everyone has a successful and effective time in music lessons, but that is not the case. And I can prove it right now with a thought experiment. If expression is the desired outcome for music lessons, would you get on a plane if flying outcomes were the same as lesson outcomes? Would you sign up for surgery if the anesthesiologist took your consciousness as seriously as your music teacher took your learning? Of course, you wouldn't. If we treated flying like music lessons, planes would be crashing all the time. If music teachers were lawyers, everyone would be in jail, which is actually kind of true in the United States. Do you think we can fly planes but can't reliably teach music? Of course we can. We just don't. We say music lessons should be fun, but we don't talk about how unfun it is to fail at them. So I have to ask again, are we taking music education seriously? Because students crash and burn all the time. It's the norm. Pilots have best practices that correlate with good outcomes. Surgeons have best practices that correlate with good outcomes. Music teachers also have best practices, but you may be surprised to learn that they do not correlate with good outcomes. In healthcare, research directs practitioners to best practices that most reliably result in patient improvement. In music lessons, method book sales and textbooks drive teaching practices that reliably result in uninterested students. Have you ever tried dancing to a textbook? Year after year, those students continue walking away in droves, and they're right to do it. And much like inappropriate use of antibiotics can make all antibiotics less effective over time, Normalizing to lousy music teaching has made our entire culture learning resistant. From Reddit to Juilliard, students, would-be learners, people who need music in their lives and have potential, show up asking for help. But instead of singing a song with them, teachers explain music notation and tell them to go practice and act like their job is done. And the student thinks they've been taught. They'll try that for a little while, maybe a few years, before they quit with an empty feeling about the whole endeavor. The culture has learned that this is good music education, but there's no follow-through. Your neighborhood piano teacher isn't invested when you're 6 to make sure you're still enjoying music at 16. And your conservatory teacher isn't concerned about your job satisfaction when you're 50. If you go to Reddit for help, like a lot of people do, rest assured that your helper has forgotten all about you before they even press enter on the cheap advice they're giving you. It's climate change writ small. Parents are dogged about protecting kids in the short term, while at the same time creating the circumstances that are going to make life drastically worse for them when they're older. Do you hear what I'm saying? Everyone is learning the wrong things in music lessons. Everyone is learning that technique and reading skills are what you need to be a real musician, while at the same time, participation in actual music making is eroded at every turn. And no, the cute video of the band concert where everyone is snickering because of how bad they sound does not count. As a matter of fact, it's the height of hypocrisy. Kids aren't learning music, they're learning that they play badly. They're even learning that it's cute to play badly. And then we send them to music lessons so they can learn confidence. Well, confidence is what we teach when we don't know how to teach music. If we taught music better, confidence would take care of itself. But this system is so entrenched that now even great ideas are met with hostility. Students take themselves seriously when teachers take them seriously. How do you feel in your own life? When you think about your musical skills, do you feel them as a positive? Or is it more regret about the things you didn't learn? Or what you could have accomplished if you'd only practiced more? I mean, do you think you're the only one who left music lessons with a glass half empty? Because that's nearly everyone. And it might sound like I'm being harsh to music teachers, but I'm not. Teaching is complex and technical. But you don't pay music teachers enough to be trained properly. This is not their fault. It's a systemic problem, and it has everything to do with capitalism. Teachers have a lot to learn. Students have a lot to teach. But students are apologetic about their skills, and teachers are defensive about theirs. I'm saying it's time to mix the chocolate and the peanut butter because we're all students and we're all teachers. The minute I stop learning is the same minute I better stop teaching. Imposter syndrome is rampant among music teachers because we're still trying to fill up our own cup when we need to be focusing on the students' needs. And we know when we're talking about scales or theory or naming pitches on the staff, we're not connecting students with the deep love for music that we have. But that's the stuff we think you want us to teach, and we can't afford to lose you as customers, even though we lose you as musicians all the time. Who's the expert here? Apparently, it's the dollar, because it governs how lessons go. The dollar requires ever-increasing profit quarter after quarter. Students need us to teach with a through line of a lifetime, and the two goals don't mix. It's no wonder we don't feel real in that context. The other stuff needs to wait. The love needs to come first, and it needs to remain. If students are going to learn, teachers have to model not just the subject matter, but learning itself. In other words, teachers have to be learners. teachers have to be students too. And this is about to get nuanced, but if you're trying to grow as a musician, this is critical for you to understand. We love art because we value expression. And whose expression should we value more than the student who's in the room with us? The glass is you. Your art is the overflow. Teachers do our best work when we help you understand that vessel. Could you imagine a teacher telling Joni Mitchell how to hold a guitar? Or telling Glenn Gould how to sit? Or explaining key signatures to Oscar Peterson? If you're going to try to teach somebody like that, you'd better do it with the utmost respect. You'd better know why it's so important for them to know that. And you'd better spend serious time making it relevant to them before you start talking at them. Well, guess what? When you respect that beginner student as much as if they were Joni Mitchell or Oscar Peterson, it'll change the way you teach. It'll make you a better teacher. Teachers, there's nothing you need to teach that's more important than what they're ready to learn right now at this moment. The student in front of you is more important, more real than our musical heroes. Ludwig van Beethoven was one of my heroes. But Beethoven's entire output could be erased today and people would still be making music. But when enough students today are learning the wrong things, then we're in the dark ages. You can't assume that music will be around in 50 years if you aren't singing today. That's why your student is more important than Beethoven. And if you are a student, learning to create music yourself is more important than learning Beethoven. I'm not saying we shouldn't teach music by dead people. I'm saying they valued creativity. We should too. We learn music by experiencing it. So that's how we should teach it. But we don't teach music, we teach shadows of music. Here's what I mean. What do we teach from our very earliest music classes? We teach reading and performance. A quarter note gets one beat. You got to learn this music for the Christmas concert. As a matter of fact, even my degree from the Eastman School of Music is a master's in piano performance and literature. Think about that. Prioritizing reading and performance creates the circumstances that lead directly to failure. Music teachers will tell me, oh, we need to teach students to read music so they won't be illiterate. I say, you've been so busy teaching it, you haven't stopped to notice your students aren't learning it. They say, yeah, but they have to learn to read in order to express themselves. I say, have you heard of Stevie Wonder or Paul McCartney? They don't read music. They're not limited because they never learned to read. They're expressive because they're unencumbered by the weight of traditional notation. This fixation has become so ingrained in music education that we value reading music over the music being read. Reading is a useful tool, and that's all it is. And if we truly wanted students to learn it, we'd keep it in its proper place after more fundamental skills I'm going to talk about in a minute. Would you think of putting a book in front of a child before that child knew how to put some words together and make a sentence? Of course you wouldn't. So why are we teaching notes on a staff before students are creating their own music? The sequencing is critical. I'm not saying teachers should teach less. I'm saying we should teach better. And stop blaming students for their failure. If you're frustrated because students aren't practicing enough, it's because they haven't been prepared to invest in what you're asking them to do. If they're rushing or dragging or hesitating, it's because they're not understanding the movement of the piece of music in their own body. All instrumental technique is a refinement of big body movements down to the precise small movements necessary to play an instrument. If your student is missing a lot of notes, it's because they don't understand the pitch relationships of a piece of music. And they get that from singing. And remember, I've got a degree in piano literature. I'm not trying to keep people stupid. I'm just noticing when the current system already does that. We think singing and moving is remedial, like it's the poor man's music education, while the serious students focus on theory and reading. That's backwards. And I'm going to talk more about that in the next segment. We should be focusing on understanding and expression. Reading is the shadow of understanding. Performance is the shadow of expression. We teach middle C, but we don't teach harmony. We teach quarter notes, but we don't teach rhythm. You can only learn to read music after you understand music. And when performance is separated from expression, it becomes performative. Performance of an expression is not the expression itself. It's once removed from expression. This is why we have conservatory grads who can play 10 notes a second, but they couldn't find a groove or improvise over a chord progression to save their life. By teaching the shadows first, we're preventing students from ever seeing the light, let alone being the light. We fail students when they don't learn to read music or perform up to our expectations. That's gatekeeping. What we can't do is fail students for the way they understand music or the way they express themselves. Those things are always theirs, and that's the heart of a musical culture. What we can do is make music with them and share skills that we found meaningful for our own expression. This is how we nurture. This is how we create a musical culture. Next, I'm going to leave you with an idea that I hope will last much longer than I do. It's a framework for being a successful music student or teacher. But it's more than that. It's a framework for all education, including the way we teach ourselves. So now that I've set the stage, I guess it's time for me to get to the punchline. So I'm going to share an idea that's been rolling around in my head for a few weeks now, and it would take me 10 videos to unpack it, but I'm just going to say a few things about it here, and after that, it's yours to unpack. I think it's profound. You might or might not. I guess it depends on what you do with it. But I wanted to find a fundamental truth to music education. Not so I could tell you how to do it, because that's looking backwards, but so you can value your ideas, because that's how we move forward. So here goes. Teach in a way that you can learn what they need you to know. Teach in a way that you can learn what they need you to know. I first thought of this in my role as a piano teacher. But notice how teaching and learning are equally valued. Or maybe I should say teachers and learners are equally valued, because we're talking about people. There's no teaching if people aren't learning. Teaching is for students. The balance in this culture is when the teacher gets paid. But that scale is currently broken. When my teaching is centered on learning from you, I'm a more effective teacher, because now I have to be aware of you instead of teaching at you. I need to be aware of what you've learned and what you're ready to learn now. When I'm open to what you bring to the lesson, I'm modeling a way for you to be open for yourself and to value what you bring to the culture. And it does not matter whether you touched your instrument since the last lesson, because there's nothing I need to teach that's more important than what you're ready to learn right now. Music isn't in the instrument anyway. Music is you. There won't be any music in the instrument unless you put it there. This framework introduces real stakes to the equation because we're acknowledging that expression isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. Ideally, this should feel like freedom for everyone, not pressure, because as a teacher, now I'm freed from having to turn the next page in the method book whether you're ready or not. And I'm able to just be present with you, the student. And I value being present for myself because I understand that needs to be in place before I can be fully present for my student in the way I want to be. Teach in a way that you can learn what they need you to know. This framework also models the importance of creativity because it's not a statement that tells you what to do. Instead, it's about what has to be done and gives you room to create ways to go about it. Contrast this with textbooks and method books where the teacher's job is mostly just to turn the pages in the book and tell students when they're making mistakes. This also makes it clear that learners have to be active participants. In a culture that doesn't value creativity and expression, your learning is as important as the nuclear codes. When you feel that lesson activities aren't working for you, you need to be able to call your teacher on that so you can find a way forward that does work, even if you're teaching yourself. This is not just about expressing what you want to. Before that, it's about finding what you need to express, because expression is a need. Your voice is important, and we can't afford to get this wrong. Music teachers always seem to assume that you hear so much music in your life that you come to us already ready to learn what a quarter note is. I do not find that to be the case. There's a necessary preparation that we're missing, and it's listening. And then it's singing and moving. Listening, singing, and moving. Those things are the beginning, middle, and end of music, whether you're playing an instrument or not. Rhythm is based in you. You learn rhythm from coordinating your movement, not from counting, not from quarter notes. Pitch is based in you. You learn pitch from singing, not from reading notes on a staff or a theory book about chord progressions. At this point, I think we could burn every method book and replace that lesson time with singing songs and chanting rhythms, and we'd end up with a more musical culture than we have now. I even think more students would learn to read music because the current setup ignores the preparation for that skill. So almost nobody is learning it anyway. Of course, the way teachers employ singing and moving and chanting can be very technical. And I made plenty of videos about the technical aspects of teaching, but they didn't land the way I wanted them to. So I wanted to dig deeper and find something more fundamental, more accessible. And it's this: sing and move and chant. Do it however you see fit. If you're moving, you're learning. If you're singing, you're learning. Whether you're a student or a teacher, you literally cannot screw this up. Our culture will be more musical when more people are singing and moving, more so than if there was a Juilliard professor in every household. I promise it does not matter what a time signature is if you aren't singing songs. When I teach like there's something you need to know, I'm taking you seriously. You might not even know what it is yet or how to express it, but that's okay because it's my job to help you. And remember, we're not even talking about words. We're talking about something even more fundamentally human. Movement and voice, sometimes scary, primal, sometimes fun. I bristle when I see music courses advertising about how fun and simple music is. It's like they think you're simple. I don't think you're simple. I think you're complex. And your music could be complex if that's what you like. If the way into music is so simple, then why are there so many masses huddled right outside the door? Well, it could be simple, but not until we habituate to singing and moving. That's fun for teachers and students. And it's serious at the same time. Teach in a way that you can learn what they need you to know. Finally, I want you to pay attention to the way this statement works when you're teaching yourself. So often, self-destructive, sabotaging behaviors result when there's something deep inside that we haven't processed. It takes so much courage to do that processing, but it's necessary. You're more likely to change the way you feel by changing the way you act than the other way around. Singing and moving is a great action to start that process. You can live in such a way that you're open to learning from what that little kid inside needs you to know. And I think this is what needs to happen before we can make things better as individuals and as a culture. Teach yourself in a way that you can learn what you need to know. Thank you for listening.